From Sabrina Carpenter's new album cover to Sydney Sweeney's bathwater soap and beyond, a spate of recent controversies have some people questioning if pop culture is not only signaling, but aiding in the backtracking of female empowerment. But while these recent issues might be new, this conversation certainly isn't. So why are people mad at Sydney and Sabrina? Where does it fit into the larger conversation? And is it really a problem? Let's take a closer look. Disagreements around how sexual and desirable a woman is allowed to be, and how much control she is allowed to have over her own sexuality, go back forever. But much of our modern understanding of these issues and feminism as a whole began to really come to the forefront over the course of the last century or so as society went through several waves of feminist thought. Through all of them has existed a tension created by the idea of female sexuality itself, and how much freedom one should have over it, and indeed how much control one could have over it in a world designed by the patriarchy. After women had gained power and a sense of self-sufficiency with their work away from more traditional roles in the home, and the aiding of the war effort during World War II, for example, there were societal anxieties that they had become a bit too free and in control of their own lives. As a result, the noir femme fatale began popping up all over the place on screen.
Gilda, are you decent?
Me?
She was sexy, powerful, and confident, but also a bad woman who needed to be punished and put back in her place. These characters allowed audiences to enjoy this sexuality and power, while still in the end reminding them that it wasn't acceptable. The type of sexuality that was generally seen as more acceptable was one that was more innocent, less vixen going after what she wants, more sexy sweetie who doesn't ask too many questions. Take the persona Marilyn Monroe created for herself, an alter ego that was beautiful and bubbly and generally inoffensive, though even then there was pushback because the so-called ideal woman to marry was one who didn't exude sexuality at all.
You're a Jackie or Marilyn?
Leaning into a very specific, male-focused idea of sexuality in order to achieve commercial success certainly didn't begin or end with Marilyn, but she has become one of the most iconic examples that is referenced again and again. From Jane Mansfield essentially launching her own career by satirizing Marilyn's, to others who have attempted to copy aspects of her persona directly or in a tongue-in-cheek way. Hers is a sexuality that has come to feel safe, no matter how overt, and so in some respects able to skirt the issues that arise with more raunchy or direct displays. Pop stars have had to walk this line as well, being pushed to be sexy to be more commercially viable, but also not to go too far and be labeled a problem. In recent decades, pop culture has particularly enjoyed using young female pop stars walking this line as they come into adulthood as punching bags. If they don't lean in enough, they're prudes who will never escape their child star roots. If they go too far, they're naughty and shouldn't be allowed to have a platform at all. Of course, so much of this, from the femme fatales to Marilyns versus Jackies to the pop stars and beyond, is actually not just about sexuality. It's about personal control and money. And as women have, as a whole, gained more personal power over both their sexuality and their own finances, the degree to which it's seen as specifically empowering to use one to beget the other has fluctuated. This has led to some major pushback against some modern young stars who are using more old-school attempts at grabbing the male gaze to garner attention. From Sydney Sweeney selling soap that allegedly contained some of her own bathwater, to Sabrina Carpenter likening herself to a dog. In many of these modern controversies, there's a question of the degree to which it was intended to be satirical. These women and their audiences are well aware of how they're seen by some portions of society. So by playing into that in a winking way, are they smartly sending up that exact stereotyping that's been used against them? Or are they actually just leaning into it?
You put a greased, naked woman
Yes.
on all fours
Yes.
with a dog collar
With a dog
around her
collar?
neck.
No,
you don't
don't.
find that sexist?
This is 1982.
Sydney has been rather open about the fact that she is very specifically and explicitly using her looks and appeal to men to further her career and make money.
Let's face it, guys only want one thing.
About her actively being a part of the planning and execution of her fake relationship with Glenn Powell to help promote their rom-com Anyone But You, for example, she told the New York Times, "I was on every call. I was in text group chats. I was probably keeping everyone over at Sony Marketing and Distribution awake at night because I couldn't stop with ideas. I wanted to make sure that we were actively having a conversation with the audience as we were promoting this film, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who created the entire narrative."
Are they watching?
Yep.
Are they buying it?
She knew that these rumors would both help get people talking about the film and continue to boost her persona as a desirable young sex symbol in the public consciousness. Most recently, she's made waves for becoming the spokesperson for a male-oriented soap company, especially with their most recent release, a soap that allegedly features some of Sydney's own bathwater. This is obviously an attempt to play into the long-standing joke of a woman being so hot that a man would drink her bathwater just to feel close to her.
In my experiences, I found two types of men, the decent ones and the dogs.
You so fine, baby. I drank a tub of your bathwater.
But this, on top of the feeling that she's constantly playing into the male gaze and then framing it as empowering solely because it makes her money, has started to grate on some people. On the one hand, she does not come from money. Her most well-known media hit is one that's only managed to put out 2 seasons in 6 years. And she's been open about how expensive trying to maintain her life in LA is under these conditions. And so there has been a, well, you gotta do what you gotta do, girl, aspect to the conversation around her choices. But on the other hand, in our current moment in particular, her leaning so hard into this kind of branding instead of her actual talent has begun to rub some people the wrong way. Sabrina Carpenter has had a bit of a different path, more in line with the par-for-the-course child star trajectory of becoming more openly sexual in a very specific commercial way as she moved into adult pop. Like with Marilyn, her more winking, tongue-in-cheek sexuality, especially paired with an aesthetic that called back to that period, felt a bit safer or more relatable than some of her more overtly raunchy counterparts might have to some fans. But as she's continued down that path, and you're starting to second-guess the degree to which she's actually deliberately creating a caricature as part of a larger commentary.
We don't have this mentality anymore.
Well, you should have
Listen
seen
to
the
me.
cover they wanted to do.
I don't care
wasn't
what they
McCullough,
want.
believe me.
See, now,
While there was some hubbub about part of her choreography during one of her songs during her most recent tour, things really popped off when she revealed her newest album cover and title, named Man's Best Friend, and featuring her on all fours in front of a man who was pulling her hair. The cover immediately sparked controversy. Defenders pointed out that it all pretty clearly seemed to be satire, mocking how the relationship she's fallen into make her feel, and also making a joke about being a bitch. But many people, random pop listeners and fans alike, felt the cover was degrading, totally missing the mark if it was intended to be satirical. Sabrina is a very funny person and is often making fun of both herself and culture at large. So it's not at all out of place to imagine that it was indeed intended to lampoon the kind of relationship it's depicting. But just because something is intended to be satirical doesn't automatically mean that it's successful, or that it should be free from criticism. Part of satire is thinking about the intended audience and their ability to understand both what you're sending up and the point you're trying to make. So given that many of our own fans don't seem on board, it does seem to have missed the mark in terms of effective satire. It's possible that taking it a bit further into that realm could have made it more clear. For example, having a back cover featuring her mauling that same man, to play on the idea of being a man-eater and overall make it more clear that the intent was to lampoon these kinds of labels that have been placed on women due to their relationships. Defenders of the cover have also connected this controversy to the larger discussion about media literacy. And while there certainly is a societal issue concerning media literacy, that doesn't automatically mean that everything that doesn't land fails solely because people just don't get it. After the controversy didn't quickly die down, Sabrina released a new alternative cover, one that seems to directly reference that connection to Marilyn and her sexuality. Where Sydney's choices often feel more transactional, that is, I am knowingly doing this specifically for men because I know that it will benefit me financially, Sabrina seems to be getting an even larger negative reaction because her audience, at least initially, seemed to be other women, and now they feel like she's leaving them behind and pivoting to a more exclusively male-focused gaze. But for her last album that shot her into mainstream stardom at least, she was already doing a lot of these same things. It seems that people just initially read it as more of a winking in joke, and are now starting to realize, oh, you're for real about that. All of these kinds of discussions also bring up the question of choice, and how much these women owe their audiences and are responsible for their contributions to the larger culture. Buried in all of this is the question of how much others should be allowed to police these young women's choices. This debate around leaning into the traditional male gaze and the larger patriarchy but framing it as being actually empowering because you want to do it has been going on for decades. It has in recent years coalesced in some corners into an idea that you can't critique anything any other woman does. because critiquing any woman ever is inherently anti-feminist. But that's just not the case. In her article for Cambridge University Press, titled Choice Feminism and the Fear of Politics, Mikhail L. Ferguson writes, "Choice feminism is motivated by a fear of politics. It enables feminists to sidestep the difficulties of making the personal political, making judgments and demanding change of friends, family, and lovers. Yet judgment, exclusion, and calls for change are unavoidable parts of politics. Regardless of what we decide to do with our lives and how we choose to live, all of our choices are still being made within the patriarchal world in which we're forced to exist. And our choices can also have larger repercussions within our communities and societies as a whole. And so while it's definitely not okay for people to be constantly looking for any reason to tear apart every woman, it also doesn't make sense to say that no woman can ever be critiqued for her choices. While some people absolutely take their scrutiny too far or just turn it into straight-up bashing, that doesn't automatically invalidate others' very genuine critiques of this kind of behavior. These types of controversies become lightning rods for discussion not because what one or two random celebs does is so terribly important, but because it at times feels so impossible to have a large-scale, genuine conversation about these topics the way people will pay attention to without some kind of hook like a celebrity. And having these kinds of discussions in relation to celebrities who we all know and who don't seem like they're genuinely trying to harm anyone can also be an easier in for people who feel like they don't yet quite have the words or full understanding to dig into those larger, more far-reaching topics. While people might want to blow off these discussions as frivolous or unimportant, in our current moment when so many rights are being revoked and efforts to push women back into older, more restrictive modes of being are abound, having these kinds of discussions about how pop culture and the media at large shape our world and our understanding of it actually is important. None of this means that Sabrina and Sydney are bad people, or that they've deliberately set out to harm anyone, or set feminism back 50 years or anything else that's been getting lobbed their way. Thinking critically about these events just gives the audience an opportunity to think more about their own relationship with the media, how they absorb it, and how it shapes them, and the degree to which they want to continue to participate in it in this way.
It's cool if you like it. It's alright if you don't. Just decide for yourselves.
That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.